which has kind of resulted in coming down of the use of transport, be it private or public. Public transport has been more severely impacted. For the only reason is there is the insecurity playing in the mind of public about commuting in a close confined area with people in general. So this has led to sharp decline in again public transportation use. uh, Social distancing will also make it difficult in the near time to come for people in general to adopt public transportation. In Delhi, the metros were doing very well, but with now, I don't know how and what will be the mindset of people to kind of adopt to getting into public transportation going forward. While it will always remain essential for the number of people it carries, for the sheer volume it brings to commute, but the ridership will take a back seat for some time. And since we are opening up now, there are questions, there are doubts, there are fears, but with that there are also plans and there are SOPs. How are we going to manage this fine balance between the fear, dispelling the fear, and returning confidence in public transportation? How public transportation system is gearing up to rise to the occasion in ensuring security and safety of their own staff and their customers? To address some of these, we have a very eminent panel from the government and the private sector who will be talking to us today. And to just name them, I have Srimati Shikha, IAS, MD, Bangalore Metropolitan Transport Corporation. Mr. Rajshekhar will join us in a bit. He is a bit caught up. He is from the Uttar Pradesh State Road Transport Corporation. Vaibhav Dangeji is the advisor, NHAI, Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Palash Roy Chaudhary ji is also co-chair of FICCI working group on future of mobility, and he is the chairman and managing director of Smart E. We have Nishant Arya, who's the executive director of JBM Group and chairman, Linde Women. Mr. Prasanna Patwardhan will also present a larger group as is the president of Bus Operators Confederation of India, besides being the chairman and managing director of Prasanna Purple Mobility. We have Rupa Nandi from UITP. And to moderate this beautifully, we have Jagan Narayan Padmanabhan. He's a practice leader and director of transport and logistics with CRISIL. With this, I now hand the baton to Mr. Palash Roy Chaudhary. I invite him to please deliver the welcome address.
Neja, thank you so much for the introduction. And also a big thank you to FICCI for organizing this very relevant webinar. So good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar on Business Continuity Plan for Efficient Public Transportation and the path to recovery post-COVID. In the current context, I think this discussion is very relevant and very timely as the public transportation systems, the economy, looks to reopen in a phased manner in the coming days. So all of us, ladies and gentlemen, have experienced over the last couple of months and continue to experience the unprecedented disruption, if you will, that COVID has brought about. None of us obviously had expected to see anything like this in our lifetimes. We had only read about such events in books and maybe watched Hollywood movies, but the fact that it's upon us, and obviously given that we had never expected this, we were never prepared for an event like this. So COVID-19 has, as we all know, as we can all experience, has left in its wake significant challenges for multiple sectors of the economy, existential crisis, if you will, in certain parts. And our own transportation segment is also severely affected. Now, in today's discussion, what we would like to deliberate on are two things. We have two goals in front of us as we look ahead. One is the immediate near term, where I think all the stakeholders should come together and establish standard operating procedures and protocols to immediately address the public health safety concerns and therefore very quickly rebuild the commuter confidence and bring them back into the public transportation system. So that's absolutely the immediate need of the hour. But once we have done this, it also behooves us to discuss that in the mid to long term, what are some of the learnings that have come out of COVID? What are some of the underlying potential macro trends that will emerge out of the COVID environment? And how should, as a public transportation system apparatus, we address some of those trends in the mid to long term? So that's the second part of the goal that we would like to discuss today. Now, FICCI, as you know, has been very active in engaging with the businesses. The transportation segment has a couple of bodies within FICCI where we deliberate closely with the stakeholders and then bring the recommendations back up to the government for remedial measurements, policy changes, etc. And today's effort is a continuation to that, where some of the recommendations that come out of today's discussions will be presented to the government. On behalf of all of us in FICCI, I'd like to thank the Government of India for being encouraging in close public participation, public discussion, feedback from these stakeholders. And it is quite refreshing that the policy changes that we see coming from the government are quite immediate and in response to some of the feedback that we have given to them in the past. So with that background, coming to today's discussion, as Neerja has already introduced, we have a stellar panel, a good mix of government as well as industry, as well as relevant experts from the sector. And I really look forward to an hour of very interesting, very engaging, very enlightening discussion. So once again, a very warm welcome to all of you. And at this point, I'd like to stop and hand over to the session moderator, Mr. Jagan Narayan. Jagan, over to you.
Thanks, Palash. Thanks, Neerja, for making the introductions. It's indeed a great pleasure to be doing this moderation of this session. And in terms of the panel, we have got a cross-section of the panel, people who are on the ground running the buses. We've got people who are the other additional stakeholders who are closely associated with the overall transportation industry. And we also have people from the central government. I think that you couldn't have got a better panel than this. Just to set a context and probably start initiating the conversation, I want to just put some of the numbers right in front. You know, the state road transport units carry about 68 million passengers per day. Put it in context, that's like about 3 times more than what railways carry. The total number of employees just on the state road transport, not the overall other picture part of it, is itself close to 738,000. So, and the kind of the cost at which that they are doing this is at close to or less than a rupee per kilometer. So this clearly touches every nook and corner of the country. All the stakeholders in terms of strata of society are impacted by these road transport part of it and the public transport, and hence it's a very important aspect that we want to be sitting and deliberating. And we've got the panelists, as I said, we'll start talking about it. I would want to kind of start on a positive aspect and kind of get Ms. Shika into the first discussion point, because here at Bangalore, the road transport has started to function. That's the first positive part of it. Want to kind of understand from her that what are the initial challenges that is being faced in terms of getting this up and running, and what are the kind of expectations that people are having on ground, because that is the course to start with going forward. As we open up, what are these kind of challenges which are there? What are the expectations? Over to you, Tushika, to give us a brief overview of what's happening on ground. You are on mute just now. Yeah.
So a very good afternoon to one and all, and thanks for having us on the panel. Bangalore, after post-lockdown, started operations quite early. We opened up in a staggered way. To begin with, after first lockdown, we had started our health services where we were providing transportation to our health workers, doctors, nurses, and even patients who had to go to hospital for various reasons. Then we started our services for essential services also, like for government servants, for banking officials, and for other essential services. In third round, we opened up for contract carriage and dedicated service for industries who are allowed to function during this period. And now on 18th of May, post 18th May lockdown, we have opened up for even public. So our public transportation has started with effect from 19th of May. We gradually increased our services from 2000 in the beginning, and today we are operating around 4,700 buses every day in Bangalore. Our ridership on day one was 10,000, and now gradually it has increased up to 8 lakhs. So as you know, to begin with, it was quite dismal. It was quite disheartening that very few people were taking up to public transport. But the figures are gradually increasing, and pre-COVID days, our ridership was 35 lakhs. So we are hoping that gradually we may be able to touch even that figure, but it will take some time because important sectors are still not functioning. Our major chunk of ridership was from school-going students and from IT/BT sector. Bangalore being IT capital of the country, and also from labor sector. As you know, most of the migrant laborers have gone back to their respective states. So these three categories are not traveling with us anymore. So that's okay. In days to come, we hope to recover our ridership. Bangalore, as you know, has one of the highest number of private vehicle. For a population of 1.2 crore, we have 1 lakh registered vehicle. So it is very difficult to regain our our road space which we had earlier. So because of that, we have ensured that buses are visible, buses are prompt, buses are reliable, and they come at the given time, and the routes are fixed. Though the situation is evolving dynamically every day, we are changing our schedules also dynamically. But hopefully after it stabilizes, people will know what about the services which are there and about the frequency of buses. And again, we were expecting to see a increase in ridership. But what we are seeing right now is very low level of confidence in public transport. And this is something that we will all have to counter very effectively through our mass media campaign, through our social campaign. There's various studies which show that public transport it doesn't lead to COVID infection. We have to also show people that what kind of strategic protocols which we are following to and sanitize the buses, to disinfect the buses daily. We have a very strict SOP which we follow every day for cleaning of buses and disinfecting the buses. That should be known to public. We check the temperature of our crew daily before they report to duty, and also they have been given proper protective equipments to cover their faces. We have given them face masks as well as face shields and gloves. And we have also made it compulsory for commuters to wear masks, and we are not allowing beyond a particular point, we are not allowing the passengers to board the buses, so to avoid crowding. And most importantly, one more the important aspect is ticketing, because people there is a lot of exchange of cash and currency while they take tickets, because the denomination of tickets in city buses is quite small. So what we have done, first we started up with only pass only mechanism, and now we have introduced flat ticket. And we have also introduced digital ticketing by way of QR code. So 50% of our buses are already having QR code, and in a week's time, we are going to extend it to all our buses. So these are some of the measures by which public can regain their confidence in public transport and come back to us, because between metro and us, we were catering to 42% of the trip needs of the city. And that obviously, if that is let go, then there would be huge traffic problem on the roads. So that is from BMTC.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to kind of step in and say that there's a fair amount of participation I can see here within the Zoom. Also, for people who are not able to log in, there is also we are live on the YouTube channel on the FICCI. So FICCI YouTube channel is carrying this live. So please feel free to log in there as well. There's one question which I had, Shikha, in my mind is in terms of the social distancing, right? And that's something which is going in people's mind. So two parts to it is that how effectively are you able to do that within the buses? And is that a cause of concern for any people missing a bus? I know you talked about today you're having about 8 lakh passenger rides per day, which is probably 20% of what you were doing before. But even at this level, is that a concern area? Because that's playing in people's mind in terms of the social distancing within the buses.
See, social distancing is a huge challenge for buses, especially for city buses, because you are aware that in cities like Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi, for that matter, and in any other bigger city, the main ridership is during peak hours, that is morning and evening, which is the office, which coincides with the office timing, and that is when 80% of the passengers need the transportation facility. So it was more than what it is now. In future, it is going to be a big challenge when people start traveling again in buses. So what we have ensured is right now, earlier in the first phase, we were allowing only 50% of the seating capacity. Now we are allowing up to 30 people allowed to 30 people in a bus, which is like 10 to 12 lesser than what is seating capacity, but strictly no standing policy, because it is a standing commuters who may lead to problem, because they have to touch places to, they will be moving with the bus and they would be losing their balance and falling on others. So that is something which we could ensure, that no standing policy. But for bus system, I feel, especially for city buses, in spite of having put 85% of our buses what we had on roads, though we have been able to maintain no standing policy, but we are finding it very difficult to convey to people to not to sit on the unoccupied seats. So that is a big challenge. But now that the airlines have also allowed full seating capacity, I'm not sure why for the shorter trips like city buses, why that should not be our policy. So we have asked our state government, and they have referred the matter to the technical committee to take a call on this. My view is that since airlines have allowed, and since our trips are much shorter than that, ensuring that the commuters wear their masks and maintain proper hygiene and sanitizers being provided in buses, I don't see why that should not be allowed.
Sure, thank you. So I want to get in Prasanna now into the conversation in terms of what are the real challenges which is now being faced. So we heard from the state undertaking how they have coped up and kind of getting on stream. But Prasanna, would you be able to kind of elaborate what are the impacts that has happened in terms of from the private sector? What are the real challenges which has been faced?
So as far as private buses are concerned, most of the private buses are still under lockdown. So we are not allowed to operate in almost all part of the country. In some part it is allowed, but with social distancing norm, it is becoming difficult. But let me give you some perspective about how much contribution private operators make. So as everybody knows, in India, about 90% of the people are dependent on public transport because they don't own any vehicle. Out of that 90% are carried by road transport, because if you take number of trips, all put together, railways take about 2.3 crore people every day. Airlines, all airlines put together, take about 1.5 crore people every day. Passenger trips I am referring to. As you said, all STUs put together take about around 7 crore people every day, passenger trips every day. And private operators take 30 crores people every day, passenger trips every day. So you can imagine the quantum what private operators take. And even in terms of employment, it provides employment to about livelihood, I would say, to about 3 crore people. And out of that, again, 90% people, those who are worker, are blue-collared workers. So this industry provides maximum employment to people, those who are just managing their lifestyle. It also contributes to 8% of India's GDP. It pays huge taxes. And on this background, if you look at, because it also provides, it is very important to understand that it is not the employment which we provide, but it is also important to understand how many people are able to join there or enjoy their livelihood because of access to public transport, because shared mobility is the only mode which they can travel to without having any own vehicles. So on this background, we were expecting some good support from government. As yet, it has not happened. But let me give you what is going to, what are our demands, because this is the only time probably you will give me time to speak afterwards. I don't know what. So our first and foremost two demands are common to everyone across the country. First demand is, since last 3 months we are under lockdown. You can see me sitting at home. Many people I can see sitting at office, but unfortunately we are not allowed to go outside the home. Pune and Mumbai situation is very critical. So EMI, though they have given moratorium, interest waiver, and apart from interest waiver, reschedulement of loans is very, very important, because after 6 months, again, there will be a challenge from where people are going to pay this EMI every month. So reschedulement and waiver of interest, both are important. After that, second important thing is, how do we pay salaries to our people? Under lockdown, forced lockdown, how do we pay salaries to our people? And government has huge funds lying in ESI and PF funds. Why can't government use that fund for this purpose? I fail to understand. 94,000 crores are lying in ESI fund, and I don't know how much funds are lying in PF, but must be more than ESI for sure. So if these funds are utilized and recouped after, say, 3-4 years, 5 years, by increasing some percentage, that would help. So these two are common for everybody. Apart from that, what we are expecting as a transporter is waiver on motor vehicle and toll tax. Motor vehicle tax is quite huge in our country. If you go to any other countries, motor vehicle tax is in many of the countries is unheard of. Public transport do not pay any tax. And here in our country, it is other way around. We pay huge taxes. And on top of that, we pay toll also. So it is double taxation. And third is also we pay cess for building of roads. So three kind of money are taken by way of taxation from public transport, which is very, very high. So which has to be firstly reduced, brought to as near to as zero. Then there will be an insurance challenge also, because insurance premiums are increasing every now and then for last several years. So insurance, 3 months under total lockdown, insurance companies, they have saved huge amount of money in terms of claims. So they should increase our insurance policies period by this lockdown period. So this 3 months period, they should increase all policies without any discrimination for 3 months. Once this is over, this is due to lockdown, I would say.
Yeah.
But severe challenge is going to come once we start these services. Just now, I heard Shikha Madam saying about 8 lakh. I'm very happy that they have reached at least 8 lakh ridership every day. But with social distancing norm, normally in public transport, that too in city or rural where you are allowed to take standees, normally during peak time, you go up to 150 to 200 capacity of your sitting capacity, including standees. So I'm sure BMTC also takes at least 100 to around 80 to 100 people during peak time in a bus. And it is not under their control. People just rush in. So they do not have any control. Even operators do not have any control on this during peak time.
Yeah, Mr. President.
Under this condition, with 5 rupee, 10 rupee, 15 rupee rate, unless public transport bus, which operates 200 kilometers in a city, earns 12,000 rupees per day, they cannot even recover their costs. So now with 20 seats or 30 seats in a bus, which is 1/3 or 1/4 of their carrying capacity, previously there are many, forget about BMTC, but apart from them, many city services are under losses, tremendous losses. With this capacity carrying constraint.
I get your point. So you're saying that there's going to be a financial constraint, and the financial health of the SRTU and is there. I get that point. So I just want to take a bit of a breather there, and also cordially invite Mr. Rajshekhar from UPSRTC MD and CEO is also joined us now. Welcome, sir, to this panel. Great to have you amongst us. So we just started to talk about it, and we heard about the experience at Bangalore, when they have come up and how the SRTU has started to function. That's what we have covered. Would like to quickly take probably a couple of minutes from your side. What has been the experience from the UP side, and what are the plans that is there? So we've talked about how the ridership has been a bit of a challenge, even when things have got opened up at Bangalore. So it was of close to 45 lakh, now about 8 lakh. And they are also having a fair amount of stuff on the social distancing and all those. Over to you to share your experience and what you see from the state transport perspective. You're on mute just now, sir.
Thank you, Jagnan. And I'm sorry I have joined late because of some other exigencies. First of all, I would thank the FICCI team for organizing these kind of interactive sessions. And again, I welcome all the participants here. When it comes to the experience of the UPSRTC, and during the lockdown period, more or less all the corporations have faced the similar kind of challenges because all the operations were shut because of the lockdown. No commercial operations of any kind. Secondly, the different scenario with the UPSRTC was the because of the government mandate or the government decision. So almost for the month of, you can say, April and full month of May, our most of the buses were engaged in the emergency operations, especially for the transit facility for the migrant laborers and the students and the other persons, those who were stranded in various parts of the country. Meantime, we didn't had any commercial operations during that period. But again, we had the government emergency operations. When it comes to the losses, maybe you can say the initial 10 days of the March and maybe half of the April's were dry days for us. And later, as per whatever we have spent on the operations, emergency operations, that is being compensated by the government of Uttar Pradesh for the UPSRTC. So we are getting a little bit support from the government of Uttar Pradesh in that sense. But again, if you see the total cumulative losses for the lockdown period is almost more than 200 crore. And when it comes to the post-lockdown period, or you can say we began the commercial operations from 1st of June. Again, the situation is not very happy because the response is very low. The passenger turnout is very low. On the first day, we could run almost 2,440 buses. And we kept ready almost 7,500 buses. And the total number of passengers were almost 52,000 on the day one. And the day two, that is 2nd of June, the number of passengers increased to 68,000. You can say marginally it was increased. But the third day it was increased to 1.1 lakhs. But again, that is not even the 10% of the what you used to apply on a normal regular commercial day, because 1.5 million is our ridership every day. So if we see the scenario right now, and it's very grim in that sense. Again, I agree with Prasannaji what he was telling. Public transport across the world is supported fully by the concerned local authorities or the state governments or the central government, whatever is the scenario. But again, in India, and hopefully we are still waiting for the greater support from the concerned local authorities of the state government or the central government. He pointed out about the PM Care Fund and the other fund from where we could get some kind of support. And it's generally it's across all the corporation the same scenario. We might put up these demands through our concerned state governments. So hopefully we might get some kind of support as of now.
Thanks. I think that's an important point. While I can get Mr. Vaibhav Dange into the conversation in terms of the financial health, SRTUs and also the private sector being a bit challenged. And from a policy perspective, we want to look at what could be the solutioning part, right? Everybody is talking about getting in, government giving a support, fiscal support and all of that. That is also a case for all the kind of industries which are there. So I think what could be the solutioning, A, beyond this fiscal part of it, what are the things that can be looked at? I think, Vaibhav, if you can, throw some, ideas which come across, that will be of great help. And also talk about the fiscal part. Anyways, that's anyways a question that's being talked about.
Thank you, Jagan. Thank you, Vicky, for having this panel discussion. Everybody here is aware about the situation of the public transport, and particularly the STUs as well as the private operators. STUs, not only in terms of COVID impact, but overall STUs financial health is a big worry for everybody because of the various reasons and the pressure on the public. So as everybody said, as Mr. Patwardhan said or Mr. Kashikar said, one part is the immediate fiscal support which state or central government, whatever way can derive, some mechanism can be find out to support the public transport, both the state transport undertaking as well as the private operators. So I think that's one part, and which is the immediate part. But I also look at it from the perspective that the STUs per se, all across the states, will have to look at their financial health from a bit different perspective, both in terms of changing their, probably looking at more innovative operating models, which some state STUs have started doing so. There are some examples like clusters operations in Delhi, or the UP SRTC has also started leasing the buses instead of buying the buses. So I think these kind of different models will have to be looked at if we want to improve the financial health of the STUs in a long term. Because I remember in 2015, a proposal came to the ministry, and I was involved in that discussion. Madhya Pradesh state government has to close down its STU because of the financial challenge they were facing. So I think COVID is definitely the immediate and a very huge impact on the STUs. But even if we are able to tackle COVID, and I'm sure we will be, the long-term challenge for STUs to improve their health is definitely there in terms of making public transport more viable for the STUs to operate. So I think both in terms of STUs having per kilometer cost, which is much higher than probably private operators, whether it is whole the process of leasing the buses or buying the buses, the question of leasing and buying buses. So there are, I think, enough models within country and models like Transport for London, which are again a kind of integrated model of all kind of public transport coming under one umbrella and trying to make it more viable, creating necessary last mile connectivity and things like that. So I think those kind of models will have to be looked at. There is no second thought that the shared mobility and public mobility is the only answer. Rather, the COVID, the blessing in disguise is that because of the lockdown, we could understand the impact of pollution, impact of transport on our nature, and with the 15 days, 20 days of lockdown, we could see the big difference into the air quality and things like that. So there is, I don't think there is any second thought, or there is another, there is any difference of opinion that shared and public transport is the ultimately going to solve major transport issues. But I think these kind of new models will also have to look at. One more issue which probably I like to add a perspective that the STUs have good amount of assets available, particularly the depots, particularly the bus stations. So the Ministry of Road Transport has been trying to convince the STUs to look at various models on their own, or ministry can support in that term, to develop some models to monetize these assets. These assets can remain with the STUs. STUs should own these assets. There is no question of STUs, selling or sharing their assets. But STUs can effectively monetize these assets to improve their financial health. and create a a whole model, sustainable, more sustainable model. One more aspect to this sustainable model will be to also look at more cost-effective, greener fuel operation options. So I think combination of all these things probably will have to be looked at to have our public transport and particularly the STUs to be more sustainable in terms of their financial.
Thanks, Vaibhav. I'll probably get in Rupa out here and then get Nishant in. Rupa, we've talked about at the local level and at the India level. What are the experiences that you've seen at outside of India at the global level? How has this impacted the mobility? And what are the kind of experiences that we can learn from them in terms of the impact, in terms of bouncing back? And what are the precautions that we should be taking into consideration?
Thank you, Vicky, for this. I represent the International Association of Public Transport, and like me, my colleagues are spread across the world who are constantly collecting information on what's happening across public transport throughout this COVID situation. The measures that the public authorities and the operators, whether it is a bus or a metro or a light rail or even a waterborne mode of transport that is taking across the world, is gloves, masks, hand sanitizing products. They have actually put in place a regular SOP in place that in how many hours the vehicles should be cleaned. If it is a case of, let's say, an air-conditioned bus, then what should be your frequency of cleaning the filters? In terms of passengers, many countries are actually doing a safe distancing, but not all. Masks have been made mandatory. Let's say in China, South Korea, Germany, masks are mandatory. But let's say in Australia, it is not. They are just an advisory. In many places, they have looked into technology for finding a solution. So contactless payments, payment through your mobile device through a QR code. Instead, they gotten rid of many ticket collectors, checkers. Some passenger flow movement have also been sorted in many places, like getting up from a particular door and getting down. Although when we think of international cities, we know that they are way more organized than us and it is easy to implement there. And there are extreme steps also. Like in case of Wuhan, what they have done is they have given a personal QR code to everyone. So unless until you are a green person, you cannot onboard a bus or onboard a metro. So your personal QR code has to be green for you to get into this. So these are various measures that has been taken. In terms of ridership, I would really say that I am very happy to see the ridership levels that BMTC has reached right now. And I would request that Mr. Rajshekhar to not be disheartened by the current ridership levels. Because right now what has happened globally, at most places, public transport services that were running at a reduced service have now actually come back to 75 to 100% of the services offered. But in terms of ridership, they are between 15 to 30% other than China. So why, in terms of other than China, I would say, let's say the countries that are in worse situations than us, Brazil, Russia, Italy, France, Germany, who had much more COVID cases than us. They are in a situation where they are between 15 to 30%. So for BMTC to gain 25% of ridership, 20 to 25% of ridership in this shorter duration, it is really commendable because nowhere across the world public transport came to a complete halt. It was only in India. Everywhere it was being run at a reduced service. However, again, to give a little hope to both the STUs and the private operators, in case of China, in case of, I think, Shanghai, the system has come back to around 50%. I think in case of Hong Kong, it has come back to around 50% of ridership. And in case of Shanghai, it is close to 75% of ridership that is being seen right now. So when we talk of international cities, we always say that they don't have the population, they don't see the densities that we have. But Shanghai, we are talking of is a 10 million plus city, very, very comparable to our Indian cities. So they are back to 75%, and they are back in 2 months' time. So I would say that all we need is time. But again, the difference between the Chinese or Singaporean cities, Singapore or the European counterparts is that the South Asian cities are not really mandating social distancing. They are advising social distancing, but looking at the densities, they have not been able to help with that. So that's the global situation right now.
Actually, a great data point in terms of what is the kind of time frame in which that you can see a calibrated way in which this can come up, right? So you're saying that even at places like China, you're looking only at a 75% of bounce back, which is there. So at many places, you're saying that it's between 25 to 40% is where the kind of bounce back. So even from a private sector, I think that would be something that they would in fact, Mr. Prasanna was talking about it as well. It's going to impact them significantly in terms of cost. There are a lot of fixed costs which is going to hit them. So that's something to really ponder through. And we'll come back probably to BMTC and UPSRTC and how look at bringing the confidence of people to start taking on board the public transport. But I just want to get Nishant into play out here in terms of you being an important stakeholder buses and manufacturing of that. So you see a crisis in this opportunity, an opportunity in this crisis, and what's your take in terms of have you started to get more orders, or what's the stuff which you're seeing on this?
No, actually, we have been working consistently with the different cities and states across the country, whether Ahmedabad or Navi Mumbai or Delhi or in Noida or different parts of India as well for our buses. And actually, many different STUs are increasing the number of buses, as we heard from different STUs also, because the requirement is that they follow the social distancing norms and doing few other things. Another interesting thing which we have done in here is that, which is differentiating us from many others, is that we have a special focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning in our organization. So with that, what we have seen that in the latest bus body rules and other things in the last few years, the buses which have been deployed do have cameras. So with cameras, we can clearly monitor that whether social distancing is being followed in the buses, whether mask adherence is there in the buses, and at the same time, we who are cleaning the buses are cleaning them following the social distancing norms, what kind of sanitization initiatives are being taken, and also the passenger announcement system. So we are enabling it with our AI solutions, and we're seeing that the driver and with the system analyzing through the cameras, different passengers, announcements can be made that different seats and other places it's not being followed, so please do so. So I think we'll have to take a combination of both the steps, where in STUs for the short term, they'd have to increase number of buses. And this is a good opportunity at this point, because many different cities anyways today also have dearth of buses vis-a-vis the actual requirement. In India, today we are at less than 1 bus per 1,000 in our country. So about 0.75 or 0.8 to 1,000. So I think that is getting increased significantly, and with this opportunity, we should increase these number of buses and simultaneously use such solutions of artificial intelligence and machine learning, so that people sitting in the bus are following all the norms, and that can be clearly monitored. And all the SRTUs are having different kind of centers, control command centers in their STUs for looking at such kind of things. So, and we are trying to use existing infrastructure to provide these solutions. Another thing which we heard from some of the co-panelists here is that definitely in these times, the buses, we need to come with new technologies and other things. So I think seeing the kind of pollution levels going down and the kind of environment friendly technologies, the government's focus on EVs there, we hear that government of India has been pushing in FAME 2, the largest portion is going to public transport, and in public transport also to electric buses. And now still, even after COVID, they are pushing for these electric buses across the country. They're asking different states and STUs to come up with proposals which they want to really promote the electric buses in these states, so that our carbon footprint is also going down. So I think a combination of few of these measures would be very helpful. And in these times, another thing will happen, that the driver training, other kind of training measures which we have to take for safe road safety, for accidents, for repair maintenance, I think this could be very well utilized, because in many cases people have aging fleet. So the aging fleet needs that kind of maintenance support and other things, which could really change the whole ball game. And here the whole ecosystem can collaborate. So OEMs like us, operators, can work along with STUs to achieve their vision and really see how they are providing a safe, healthy, and substantial public transportation solution in a very holistic manner. That's the whole idea we're trying to propel here. And I also understand that if in certain cases, as we heard from Mr. Patwardhan, that public transport is 90% governed by the buses. So if such kind of systems can be deployed in buses horizontally across the country, it will be beneficial for all. And I think people would have a higher confidence also in public transport when they are seeing such kind of technologies being deployed. And that will also enhance the ridership for different STUs. So that's what we are working with different STUs and city governments, also trying to see how we can give them these solutions, taking this extra step forward and working with them.
So thanks, Nishant. I think you talked about the whole artificial intelligence technology part of it, right? I just want to get in Palash into the conversation. Palash, you started off, probably I'm getting in you the last, but in terms of the future e-mobility, what's the role that technology, because I strongly believe there's a lot of room for technology in current situation to bring in, disseminate information, to give the confidence to the people. Yes, there are many of them now, at least at the urban side, have smartphones. So what kind of technology inside even within bus part of it that we can bring in, so that that information dissemination happens, and there's a lot more confidence which comes across by the public at large, and they start taking up this ridership more. So what's the role of technology, Palash? You're on mute, Palash.
Can you hear me now? Is this better? Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so Jagan, thanks. The benefit of going last is that you've heard other eminent panelists speak, and what's clear is that the stress in the system is consistent and across the board. What I would like to offer towards the end is maybe a different perspective, and that is how do we use a crisis like this as a reset opportunity, right? When I gave my opening remarks, I said, look, we have two goals. One, in the near term, how do we build consumer and commuter confidence so that we can restart the system in a jiffy? And then over the midterm to a long term, how do we address some of the emerging trends? So I'll spend a couple of minutes on each. As far as the near term is concerned, I think we need to follow a three-pronged strategy. And the eminent panelists have already spoken about many of them. The first one is technology. How do we leverage technology to build consumer confidence by addressing the safety health issues? And this could be, we've talked about cashless transactions. We can also deploy thermal scanners, cameras, etc., to ensure that people who have high temperatures are not allowed to get into the public transport system. That's another technology that can be used. We have a wonderful app called Arogya Setu. And I think somebody also mentioned about customized QR codes. So unless you are green, you're not allowed to get into a public transport system. There are a lot of technologies that can be brought forth to ensure that there is adequate public safety. So that's one, that's technology. Second is standard operating procedures. One of the things that we are good at is developing policies. However, sometimes that we're not so good at, and there's an area of opportunity, is the compliance, implementation of those policies. So for instance, how many people can get into a bus, what kind of seats they can sit in, which doors to enter from, which doors to get out of, all of that can be encapsulated in a standard operating procedure. And what we need to ensure is that those standard operating procedures are followed going forward. So there's technology, there is standard operating procedures, and then to build community confidence, we also have to do a blitzkrieg around infomercials. So letting people know what to be done, what not to be done, to take away the fear of traveling in a public transport system in the near future. So if we do this three-pronged strategy, I think we'll be able to address some of the issues that are facing us in the near term, and therefore the trajectory of people coming back into the public transport system, we can accelerate the trajectory of that. Because as somebody has already said, 90% of our people need the public transport system in India to commute to their work. So there is no alternative. They have to come back. How soon they come back is something that we can impact. That's the near term. As far as the mid to long term is concerned, Dangeji mentioned a couple of macro trends that may emerge from COVID. So for instance, number one is the environmental sustainability. The silver lining of COVID, if there is one, is that over the last couple of months, we have seen the earth repair itself, from clean water in the Ganga to beautiful weather, pollution-free air in our big cities. And I'm pretty sure that all of us as responsible citizens of the country would like to keep our country like that. And therefore, through FICCI, a policy push should be made to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicle technology across the public transportation infrastructure, right from three-wheelers to four-wheelers to buses to metros to trains. Very quickly, if you can adopt electric vehicle, sustainable mobility options, I think that would be a trend that we need to focus on. Another trend that we are seeing is that across the sector, we have seen that technology has been used to effectively have people work remotely from their homes, just as we are doing this conference today. And therefore, that's another trend that may emerge over the next 4 to 5 years. People across multiple sectors may decide to work from home. And therefore, how we transform our public sector to address that. So on one side, you will see people commuting less, but last mile delivery of goods to cater to the people who are working from home is going to increase. So we run a very large last mile operation for passengers. We used to do about 100,000 plus passengers a day. In the last couple of months, obviously, passenger volume has gone down, but we are seeing a significant spike in delivery, last mile delivery. So how we can use our current public transport infrastructure, not only to move people, but maybe in the off-peak hours to move goods, to again bolster the revenues of the State Transport Corporation. Those are some of the ideas that we may think about. And lastly, another trend that I'm seeing is from a fuel security, energy security standpoint. We have been importing billions of dollars of hydrocarbon-based fuels traditionally, and from there we are moving to, let's say, electric vehicles. But now we are having to import billions of dollars of lithium batteries and electric vehicle parts from China and other sources. So the Atma Nirbhar Abhiyan that the Honorable Prime Minister has introduced, I think this could be a very, very good opportunity through FICCI again to push policy to create electric vehicle ecosystem in the country, whether it's parts, components for vehicles, or whether it's putting together large lithium cell factories in India. I think that's going to be another thing that we can definitely impact in the mid to long term through FICCI.
Thanks. The chair is from, yeah, I might have to just shift the chair, which is facing you. Yeah, so just coming back to Mr. Rajshekhar here, one of the questions which has come in from the audience is that is this COVID, will it have any impact on the ticket pricing? So I think that's because you've talked about a lot of escalation in cost and lesser ridership, so that's even going to impact the cost even further. So any thoughts around that in terms of the impact of the price of the ticket?
Yeah, it's a big dilemma for all the corporations. At the one end, we are expecting the slow increase in the ridership. And again, any kind of increase in the fare prices will definitely affect the ridership. So we need to take a conscious call on that. But again, few things are there which, as an public enterprise or a public service oriented organization, we can't neglect, especially when it comes to taking all the precautionary measures which are essential and necessary for the prevention of the COVID. If you see from the day one of the lockdown, the UPSRTC is consciously taking all the steps, including the sanitation of our buses, sanitation of all the bus stations, and during the emergency operations also, each and every bus was sanitized on regular basis, and driver conductors were given this masks, hand sanitizer, and the gloves also. And we ensured all the passengers, even the migrant laborers, now the number is almost 3.1 million in the last almost 70 days. And for everyone, we gave this hand sanitizer. It was a huge task. And again, once our commercial operations began, we ensured that every passenger who is entering the bus station is thermally scanned. Some places we are using the thermal guns, and in some larger, this one we are planning in future for the sensor-based thermal cameras, which can sense a large number of the passengers at one go. Again, the second one is we are distributing free of cost the hand sanitizer at the bus stations, and inside the bus also. Every conductor is carrying 500 ml of hand sanitizer. Every bus is sanitized once every day. Once it's the trip completes, it's sanitized. So these all overhead costs are there, which we can't ignore, because these are because of the COVID. These are the essential precaution measures which we need to take. Whether we need to load these particular additional expenditure on the tickets or not, that is it's a big dilemma again. To bail out, especially when it comes to the additional cost what we are bearing, we don't want to increase the fare price as of now, because it will adversely affect our ridership. The government to a certain extent has in principle agreed that okay, whatever is the precautionary measure what this one UPSRTC is taking. So to a certain extent, okay, they will bear, and certain extent we will bear the cost. Maybe in future we might think of increasing a COVID cess or something internally, maybe a 10% increase in the fare price. So that should not be any problem. Again, if you see, all our bus stations are equipped with the sensor-based hand sanitizer dispensers. All 115 bus stations, even larger, have 4 to 5 dispensers. Pedal dispenser of the hand sanitizers are in place, and we are running it since last many days also. So that is there. Again, we need to increase the fare, because no government is in a position right now, because their resources are scarce. It's depleting. So we can't expect the government to support. It has to be borne partly by the government, partly by the organization, and partly by the public or the passengers.
Absolutely. There's no one single answer in this that who's going to take the tab. I think it has to be shared by all the participants who are there in this ecosystem. One question I had is on the fuel part of it. So I'm not sure who can take it from the panel, but maybe Vaibhavji, maybe you in that position. Is this, when do you think India will move to adopt methanol as a fuel, either blended in vehicle or in buses? So I think there's been a lot of talk by the minister before in terms of encouraging this as an alternate fuel and adoption of it. So you want to take that?
Yeah. In terms of policy framework, all these kind of alternative fuels have been, the government has created a necessary policy framework, and those all fuels have been notified to be used in automobiles, whether it's methanol, whether it's ethanol, whether it's LNG, biofuels, biodiesel, ethanol blending, flexi engines. Everything has been, from the policy perspective, have been notified, and we have been suggesting the automobile industry to kind of take some initiative so that we can bring those kind of alternative fuels quickly into the transport, and particularly in public transport. Of course, electric buses have started coming. I think Purple Group is running the first electric bus between Pune and Mumbai, which is completely a private initiative of electric bus operated by the private operator. So I think those kind of things are happening. We also are doing some kind of pilots on how do we use the gas that has been taken out from the sewage to run the bio-CNG. The bio-CNG that has taken out from the sewage that to run the public transport, the city public transport. We are also doing experiment on how do we use 100% ethanol run buses. Particularly, we are now facing different kind of challenges in terms of sugar export has become difficult. There is a lot of overproduction of items like rice, wheat. Food Corporation of India is not able to manage those purchases which they have done through years, and this food grains are being wasted. How do we use that to convert into ethanol and run our buses on 100% ethanol or on the flexi fuels? So I think whether it's methanol, whether it's LNG, whether it's ethanol, whether it is bio-CNG, whether it is biofuel, all kind of policy framework is in place in terms of their standards, approvals are in place. We need to, I think, STUs as well as automobile manufacturers will have to take some initiative. How do we do some pilot? I think Ministry has been saying to a lot of STUs that we'll be more than happy to partner with STUs to do these kind of pilots, some of these pilots, so that these alternative fuels become functional. I remember, I think Karnataka government did some experiments on using biodiesel in the state transport buses and ethanol into state transport. So I think those kind of experiments, more on those part is required. As far as policy framework is concerned, I think that is it.
So I think I'm really conscious of the time. I think you'll have other appointments as well. I just want to give a round of last, 2 minutes for each one of you to kind of talk about, probably concentrate on how do we get the people on board, what kind of measures needs to be taken up, and elaborate further in terms of the individual aspects. Shika, you want to go first and talk about closing remarks?
So we don't have to bother too much about regaining the confidence of people, because I'm sure they will come back, because we cater to such an economic segment which they have no other option, and for the kind of services that we provide, hopefully they will come back. But we only have to wait for the normalcy to return. That is, it may take 3 to 4 months time. Until such time, it is very important that STUs are helped by government. Our state government has been taking care of our salary account for last 2 months. But at the same time, giving salary to our employees is not the only concern. There are many more things which we have to look at. Now, with the same number of buses, we will have to cater to the same number of people, and with social distancing, it's going to be a Herculean task. So we'd also request central government to give us some kind of stimulus relief or a relief package, because we have to increase our fleet strength to maintain the social distancing. It could be both capex model or FAME 2 kind of OPEX model. That's okay. Even with FAME 2, we find it very difficult, because the kind of subsidy given, we would not be able to make that kind of per kilometer payment in the current scenario. Before this pre-COVID era itself, we were finding it difficult. So it's high time that government came forward, had a discussion with STUs, and come up with some kind of relief package, which is being done for other sectors today. Thank you.
Rajshekhar? Yeah.
Yeah, there are, I think, three things we should keep in mind when it comes to the regaining of the passengers' confidence. Because three things involved are: one is key, first of all, the lockdown restrictions wherever they are. Maybe in coming days they will be relaxed fully. Maybe in few days, next few, all the malls, all the courts and other institutions will open up. Maybe the moment it will pave way for the moment. The second thing is ki, people are worried about ki, whether traveling in a public transport is safe or not. So we need to take all those precautionary measures, maybe the use of the thermal guns, hand sanitizers, masks, and sanitation of the buses, sanitation of the premises of the bus stations, wherever. So that will build a sense of confidence in the minds of the passengers. And the third one is, for the commute, they need the intramodal transport. Maybe all kinds of transport should be open, maybe whether they are the railways or the metros or maybe the private cabs and other things. So once they will open up, then the ridership will slowly start increasing. So all the combined, maybe it might take, in our view, maybe a month or 1.5 to come to that position where we can say, okay, now our expenditure and our revenues are at par. Maybe our assessment in the present scenarios, maybe it will take 1.5 months or something.
Great. Mr. Prasanna, now from the private side, and when you said probably this is the last time I will come to speak, I thought you would be able to speak one more time, but sorry, I think we really run out of time. But you want to give your from the private side, what's the how are you seeing this? Is there an opportunity for you amongst this crisis part of it? So over to you.
So first thing which I would like to state here is many things have already been said, so I will not repeat them. First thing, it is very important that public and private operators come together and find a solution rather than fighting like India and Pakistan. So that is the first thing which I think is important. Second, there has to be a holistic thinking on integrated transportation rather than independent transportation and thinking in silos. When it comes to today's situation, silos, social distancing, if at all, if government wants us to continue with social distancing, government will have to pump in money, which is 3 to 4 times what they are putting in. STOs, somehow government will see that they survive, if not die. But what about private operators? Private operators will certainly die. And we have 20,000 plus private operators, smaller operators. What would happen to them? So social distancing, while deciding on social distancing, government will have to find a way to make it sustainable for private operators. Without that, adopting social distancing is going to kill several people. Most of the operators, and along with operators, unemployment will go up. I don't know how people are saying that within 2 months, 3 months, we'll reach back to our original ridership with social distancing. So social distancing is going to be a bigger challenge going forward. So we think if airlines are allowed, if railways are allowed, if other places are allowed, why not public transport? So it has to be allowed with some safety precautions which are essential and which most of the people will take because they also want their ridership to go up. As far as other funding is concerned, without funding, sustenance of this system is very, very difficult. So on one side, there has to be some changes in legislation also. Some institutional framework also has to be set up to ensure that public transport gets its due credit. And when it comes to private operators, unfortunately, though we carry 90% of the population or 90% of the people, when it comes to hearing of our voice, we get 10% of the time. So that 10% of the time also should be proportionate to whatever we are saying. So it should be heard and it should be seen by government also that both private and public, both operators survive. When it comes to public-private partnership, it becomes more important from STU's point of view to see that their private operators survive. So when they get funding from government, that funding also has to be used to pay private operators and not should be used only to pay their own salaries and own expenditure. So public-private partnership, if it has to be survived, they will have to support private operators. So that's it. So thank you very much, Fiki, for calling me and raising our issues. And I think this is the right time when we can actually restructure the entire public transportation system. And if we take this opportunity, then I mean, we will go forward positively. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for that. I think in terms of the social distancing, Ma'am Shikha also talked about, that this is being not practiced at the airlines and other modes of transport, and hence what is the necessity out here. So I think we need to be, while being prudent in how we conduct ourselves, but making it as mandatory may not be an important aspect. It could be advisory in nature and as much as possible to do that. And I think Rupa also talked about that in other countries that this is the kind of norm that is being followed. It is advisory and not really mandatory in nature. So point well taken out here. And it also talks about the financial health of the overall ecosystem. Rupa, your closing thoughts on this?
So what I think is that restoring trust is the biggest challenge that all the STUs will have right now, besides the fact that we cater to certain strata of the society that has actually no option. But even besides that, we need to restore the trust of the public. So any type of communication, whether it is through television, through audios at the bus stations, or in-bus communication, whatever these STUs can do to tell people that, yes, these are the XYZ steps that we are doing, then they may be able to restore the trust. Second is that it is not just an operator or an authority's view, it is at a city level, that every city has to be looked at a holistic point of way. Because one thing which is very necessary here is demand management, which international cities have been able to do. They have been able to stagger timings of offices, schools. They have been able to stagger in terms of days. So it is not in the hand of an operator or an authority, but that is a very popular solution that has been taken internationally. So that is something that they can look at. Maybe Wednesday to Sunday they can start some offices, and Saturday to Tuesday could be some offices that they do, and rest of the days they work from home. So these are some of the solutions that they can look at. Third is again technology, surveillance cameras for temperature, phone-based payments. As much as you introduce them, gradually they will pick up, and there will be a lot of penetration of technology within the system. In a way, I would say that this COVID has kind of brought up a pre-existing disease that has always been there in our system, things that we always lacked and probably could have done much earlier. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Nishant,
No, I think these are very relevant points, and at this time, I would say that use of technology that you mentioned earlier about artificial intelligence being used for scanning, for mask adherence, for cleanliness in the vehicles, along with the total paraphernalia which is required, can be very well captured. And along with this, another thing which is going to be very crucial is that how do we see that in these times every penny counts for the STU or for the operators also. So here the role of electric vehicles will become even more important, environment friendly vehicles, where the total cost of ownership is much lower, your operating costs are much lower, and how we can work on some such kind of solutions. And as I would totally agree with what Ms. Nandi mentioned about the technology perspective, so how that is being integrated, and technology is enabling all of us to work on this. And an integrated approach of the whole ecosystem, whether the operators, the STUs, and the OEMs has to come together, and we are able to give a holistic solution for this problem. I think that will be very, very important, because if we leave out any element of the whole ecosystem, then it would not be sustainable, and it can't be deployed horizontally. So that will be very essential in my perspective.
great. What you, if you covered, I think all the whole spectrum of what is there. Any closing remarks from your side?
Me?
You're on mute. Palash, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. Yeah, but see, look at I think a lot has been said, and just a couple of very quick closing remarks. Number one, I completely agree with Prasanna that from a policy standpoint, we should level the playing field. If three people can sit close to each other on a flight, and if trains are being allowed to move, there is no reason why buses and metros and other ground transportation should not be allowed. So from a policy standpoint, I think there should be a leveling of the playing field, and same standards of public safety should be applicable across the board. I think all of us agree that it is not a question of if people will come back, but when. And the only thing that we can do collectively and through FICCI also is to focus on process and policy, introduce technology, introduce standard operating procedures, and ensure compliance, and then also work on awareness building on campaigns to accelerate the adoption of public transportation, people coming back. So won't repeat anything more than that. I think everybody across the panel are in alignment on some of these issues.
Thank you. So in the interest of time, not summing up entirely, but I think we are all gearing up for opening up of this and looking forward for a lot more ridership and so that the financial health of the STUs and the public transport is somewhere maintained. Use of technology, dissemination of information, bringing in the confidence, all of that is going to be a critical to this. We have jotted down all the important aspects that you wanted to talk about in the taking the financial parts that is going by the STUs and how we can
Nirja, probably you will have to take over because he is off the grid.
Okay. So we are just concluding now. This has come to an end, a very well-rounded discussion with government, private sector and experts. We've been taking notes. The team has been taking notes. They have been learning from international best practices. There have been takeaways. There have been recommendations from private sector to the government, recommendations from state government to central government. The one common line that I've seen, one common thread that we see is public transportation has to be started. Social distancing has to be maintained. The system has to be put in place. While doing so, the fear has to be dispelled. And at the same time, how do we look at financial viability of projects? So we will take down the notes of all that we've gathered today and submit it to right authorities and look forward to having more interactions like this. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. And we are very encouraged by the response because we were a little FICCI is not used to webinars. We are more used to physical events. So this is also new for us. And thank you very much for encouraging us by joining us today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, dropped out. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.